जय नित्यलील प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिविजाचार्य अष्टोत्तरस्तत श्री श्रीमद अभय चरण विंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय नित्यलील प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिविजाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्री श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय नित्यलील प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद श्रील गौर किशोरदास बाबाजी महाराज की जय नित्यलील प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद श्रील सच्चिदानंद भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय नित्यलील प्रविष्ट ओम विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्रील जगन्नाथ दास बाबाजी महाराज की श्री गौड़ीय वैष्णव गुरुवर्ग की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गो गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंठ राधा कुंड गिरिवर गोवर्धन की वृंदावन धाम की नवद्वीप धाम की यमुना माई की गंगा माई की भक्ति देवी की तुलसी देवी की सामवेद भक्त वृंद की निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि all glories to assembled devotees all glories to the assembled devotees all glories to the assembled devotees all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga all glories to Srila Prabhupada. ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानज्ञानशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वं पदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरून् श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपदान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान् सुदंश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकाकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते ताप्तकाञ्चन गौरङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुस्तुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णा प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नाम्ने गौरतिषे नमः वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय So today's shloka text 17 Indriyeshu manastani tanmatreshu yadhodbhavam bhut भूतादीना मुनुत्कृष्य महतात्मनि सन्दते इन्द्रियेषु मनस्तानि तन्मात्रेषु यदोद्भवम् भूतादीना मुनुत्कृष्य महतात्मनि सन्दते इन्द्रियेषु मनस्तानि तन्मात्रेषु यदोद्भवम् भूतादीनामुत्कृष्य महतात्मनि सन्दते इन्द्रियेषु मनस्तानि तन्मात्रेषु यदोद्भवम् Bhutadina munyutkritsha mahat-tattva sandate. Indriyeshu manastani tanmatreshu yadodbhavam. Bhutadina munyutkritsha mahat-tattva sandate. Indriyeshu manastani tanmatreshu yadodbhavam. Bhutadina munyutkritsha mahat-tattva sandate. Indriyeshu, in the sense organs. Manaha, the mind. Tani, the sense organs. Tatmatreshu, in the objects of the senses. Yatha udbhavam, wherefrom they generated. Bhuta adina, by the five elements. Amuni, all those sense objects. Utkrishya, taking out. Mahati, in the mahat-tattva. Atmani, under the ego. Sandadhe, amalgamated. Translation: Translation: He amalgamated the mind with the senses and the senses with the sense objects, according to their respective positions, and he also amalgamated the material ego with the total material energy, mahat-tattva. Let's read the purport. In respect to the ego, the total material energy is sundered in two parts. One agitated by the mode of ignorance, and the other agitated by the modes of passion and goodness. Due to the agitation by the mode of ignorance, the five gross elements are created, and due to the agitation by the mode of passion, the mind is created. And due to the agitation by the mode of goodness, false egoism or identification with matter is created. The mind is protected by a particular type of demigod. Sometimes the mind, manaha, is also understood to have a controlling deity or demigod. In this way, the total mind, namely the material mind controlled by material demigods, was amalgamated with the senses. The senses, in turn, were amalgamated with the sense objects. The sense objects are forms, tastes, smells, sounds, etc. Sound is the ultimate source of the sense objects. The mind was attracted by the sense and the senses by the sense objects, and all of them were ultimately amalgamated in the sky. The creation is so arranged that cause and effect follow one after the other. The merging process involves amalgamating the effect with the original cause. Since the ultimate cause in the material world is mahat-tattva, everything was gradually wound up and amalgamated with the mahat-tattva. This may be compared to Shunyavada or voidism, but this is the process for cleansing the real spiritual mind or consciousness. When the mind is completely washed of all material contamination, the pure consciousness acts. The sound vibration from the spiritual sky can automatically cleanse all material contaminations, as confirmed by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Cheto Darpanamarjanam. We need only take the advice of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to cleanse the mind of all material contamination. And this may be considered the summary of this difficult verse. And as soon as the whole material contamination is washed away by the process of chanting, all desires and reactions to material activities become immediately vanquished, and real life, peaceful existence begins. In this age of Kali, it is very difficult to adopt the yogic processes mentioned in this verse. Unless one is very expert in such yoga, the best course is to adopt the ways and means of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. Thus one can gloriously become free from all material contamination by the simple processes, by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Just as life in this material world has its beginning in material sound, similarly, a spiritual life has its beginning in sound vibration. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, I'm here today giving my second Bhagavatam class. To be very honest, I'm feeling very nervous, and just like last time, I'm feeling even more unqualified. This literature, it's said to be the literal incarnation of Sri Krishna himself. Now, I don't exactly understand what that means, but I understand that that is of a great deal. But I'm here on the instruction of Toshin Prabhu to try and serve the Bhagavatam and the devotees. And I guess I already mentioned the Mangala Charana at the beginning, which I should have done now. So now before I start the class, I would just like to take you guys' blessing, the Vaishnava's blessing, so that my heart may be purified. In no way or manner am I in a position where I'm capable enough to give you guys any instructions. Therefore, please see this as an attempt of me just trying to purify my heart. And if there's something, if the right words come at the right time, and if something sticks to you, please consider taking that as useful for your bhakti. Otherwise, if I say something that's against our Siddhanta and against our Sampradaya, please do chastise me and please do let me know where I can correct myself. I guess one very quick reflection I did want to mention before starting was I noticed how service is very important for bhakti. As a new devotee, that's something I wasn't very used to. I'm not very used to doing any services. I'm just used to chanting my rounds and then expecting something. But devotional service, I now understand, is not a means to a goal, but service is the goal itself. And of course, this is what our Siddhanta teaches us. At first, I would chant with all these expectations. I was hoping for something magical to happen. But now I'm of the understanding that getting the opportunity for service can be considered the fruit of all the chanting. And in a way, I can see this as my bhakti making a tiny bit of progress now that I get the opportunity to serve you guys here today. So with that meditation in mind, let's begin the discussion on this verse, Canto 4, Chapter 23, Text 17. So, we are continuing with Maharaj Prithu pastime. Maharaj Prithu is considered the Shakti Avesha incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in this chapter, he is finishing up his earthly pastimes and he's readying himself for his retirement. And as we know from the Gita, yada yada hi dharmasya, whenever there's a decline in religion, the Lord is always anxious to come on earth and help his devotees and those dear to him so that they can execute their duties. Similarly, Maharaj Prithu was one such empowered incarnation sent by the Lord specifically for these purposes. If we go back earlier to this canto, we would see that there were many discrepancies during the reign of King Vena. And the Lord sent his most confidential devotee, Maharaj Prithu from Vaikuntha, to settle these things. And then we also understand that this time was during the Satya Yuga, the very first Yuga, also known as the Golden Age. And from what we hear from the Shastras, this period in time was completely different to the one we lived in. Apparently it's said that the people in Satyuga, they were completely situated in Sattva-guna. That's a sheer contrast to what we have today, where everyone is primarily in Tamoguna. And as a result of that, perhaps, they had the lifespans of a whopping 100,000 years. Now, that's something I can't even begin to fathom. As a result, their processes for perfection and self-realization are completely different to ours. So we get a glimpse of the process Maharaj Prithu uses here to attain this perfection, this divine realization, once he has completed his worldly duties, if you may. Now, of course, Maharaj Prithu is a perfected being already. So a question would come to mind: why would a perfected devotee need to attain for liberation again? Why would he need to go to Vaikuntha again if he's already perfected, right? This is because it's the mercy of the Lord. Actually, people require this type of leader in this world. Maharaj Prithu not only came to establish worldly order, he also came to be an exemplary example, to the people. And this was how it was during the Vedic times. During the Vedic times, they wouldn't just tell you what to do or the morals to live by. The leaders themselves, they would step up and they would live up to that standard and show you how it's done. And men would follow in their footsteps. That is the Vedic processes. And this is confirmed in the Gita. Krishna himself says, I believe it's chapter 6, I might be wrong on that. But Krishna says, Yad yad acharati shreshtaha tat tad eva taro jana sayat premanam kurite lokas tat anuvartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he set by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. So Prabhupada, in the purport of that verse, mentions that such a person is what we call an acharya. And from this we can understand that Prithu Maharaj himself was an acharya for the people in the Satya Yuga. Now, when I was first reflecting on this, what came to my mind was the sad situation of the leaders we have in our current world. For example, in our Australian Parliament, I discovered that they have a bar. So after they pass a legislation, or sometimes even sadly during when they pass the legislations, the members of the Parliament, they would go grab a quick drink with their mates, and this is all seen as fine in their culture. But the sad result of this is oftentimes when members of the Parliament, they make a decision, they themselves are intoxicated. How then do you expect them to be compassionate, to lead us, and not only lead us in worldly matters, but lead us to spiritual advancement? We can see that that's completely not possible for people that are leading the world currently. And then you can take a look at the President of America. He's a convicted felon himself. So we see the contrast with which the Vedic culture, the Vedic standards for being a leader, being an acharya. So, yeah, this verse is Prithu Maharaj demonstrating how to attain perfection in that yuga, which is through this very complicated practices. We can see he has to take the material ego, take the material energy, and then amalgamate that, and then combine that with mahat-tattva, and then honestly, when I just read this, I'm just confused. I have no idea what he's saying, but that's the type of austerities that people in the Satya Yuga would perform. So yeah, one thing I came to realize when I read this was that the Vedas are so complicated, and the philosophy, they go really deep. Well, we can see with physics and mathematics and the sciences, people spend decades trying to master that stuff. They go to universities, get degrees, try to get PhDs, and then even in their fields, they don't understand what, for example, quantum physicists, like the top quantum physicists, they say that they were confused about their own field. So we can see how layered and mechanical gross matter in itself is. Now, try and think of what the type of knowledge the Vedas are trying to tell us. They're not only talking about gross matter, they talk about subtle matter, the different types of energies, the different types of planetary systems that's not within Earth, right? So one can only imagine the type of intelligence required to understand such topics. These are topics of the highest conceptions, the conceptions that modern science would not be even able to take into place. But yet people in Satya Yuga, they would need to somehow grind through these, understand this, and apply it practically to their life. And one thing that I did notice from the purport was Prabhupada, he takes a bit of time actually explaining to us what these different processes are. And what I did wonder was, well, why would Prabhupada waste time explaining all of this? Why not just say chant Hare Krishna and be happy? And I think the reason why Prabhupada does it was to get us an appreciation for Bhakti Yoga. Because when we first read this, we see take the mind, amalgam with the spiritual sky, blah blah blah. It all sounds like gibberish for someone dumb like me. Now imagine this was the only process through which you can progress spiritually at that time. What would we do? Right? But we, the people of Kali Yuga, we have a hard time comprehending this, what to speak of actually doing it. So the conclusion here is that Prabhupada really wants to show that the yogic process, it's hard. Even today there are so many paths that the Vedas offer for all different types of practitioners. In India today they practice all sorts of different things. Like, for example, we have the Naga yogis. They don't wear any clothes. They live naked in caves and in mountains, and they don't have any social connections. And then you have a different sect of people. Perhaps you guys have heard of it. They're called the Aghoris, and their processes are completely wild. They, in fact, survive off of eating their own feces and eating from dead people. So. You can see the type of austerities some parts of Vedas require, especially what this is talking about, which is Ashtanga Yoga. And Prabhupada intentionally describes this to communicate how hard these processes are. And then, what does he say? He says, we only need to take the advice of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. This is the conclusion of this difficult verse. He himself claims that, yes, everything here is difficult on the surface. The Vedas are complicated. It's dealing with gross matter, subtle matter, this, that, something, all those things that we ourselves cannot comprehend. But what is the conclusion? It's very simple. It's to follow the words of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and chant the Mahamantra. Essentially, it's his way of saying, forget all these complex systems. We're in the Dhanya Kali Yuga. We should read this and increase our appreciation for how easy the process is for spiritual perfection through Bhakti Yoga. And this reminds me of one story that I heard before becoming a devotee. That's what really sold me on becoming a devotee. So Toshan Prabhu was the one that mentioned this story to me. It's about a monk that lived 200 years ago. And it's a monk back in India. He was a practitioner of yoga, a very expert practitioner of yoga, and he would perform his sadhana and his meditations in the forest at night. And what he would do is would go to the forest and then he would perform all these yogic asanas and postures, and he would try to control his senses and perform so many austerities. So one night he was going about his sadhana. He was sitting depths of dark forest, midnight. But suddenly he gets disturbed by the sounds of someone running through the forest. And what caught him by surprise was the sound of ankle bells. Now, we know that ankle bells are only worn in India, and this was sometime 200, 300 years ago. We can understand how conservative the situation was at that time. So this expert yogi, even though he was trying to be focused on his practice, he couldn't help but imagine who was running towards him or why a girl was out this late at night. Anyways, he tries to continue to focus on his sadhana. But the ankle bells get closer and closer, and eventually, boom, right? The girl runs into the monk in the dark, and both of them fall down, and the monk, he gets up absolutely furious. My sadhana for today is gone. And he tries to waddle himself back up, and then he looks around, and what does he see? He sees that the girl, she's gone. She's gone like nothing ever happened, barely even noticing his existence. And she just ran off into the distance. Nothing stopped her in her path. And this monk, he was angry. He went on to investigate the situation, and he later finds out that she had sneaked away from her husband and gone to visit her secret lover. So this was a case of infidelity. And in the morning, it just so happens that the monk came across her again, and what took the monk by surprise is that she doesn't even recognize him or remember falling down, but she just pays obeisances like you would do in that culture during that time, and she just leaves. And instead of getting angry or chastising, or as we see these monks often do, curse the girl, what the monk has is a moment of realization. Years of this practice, years of austerities, sacrifices, all to try and control the senses and the mind. And what happens is meditation is broken by a teenage girl. Yet, on the other hand, this young girl, she was running to find her lover in the dark. Even falling down, hitting the old man, was not an obstacle to her. She didn't even flinch for a second. Why? Because she was on the platform of attachment. And this is the lowest material love. It's infidelity, it's cheating. Yet she was somehow more determined than the monk himself. And the monk had to question himself. I did all these practices, and yet that girl is more determined than me. So this taught the monk an important lesson, which is the power of attachment. Now, if you can imagine that such low material love can create such a level of determination, what to speak if you have developed love for the Supreme Lord Himself? Even the tiniest bit of attachment and attraction to the supremely all-attractive reality, the beautiful Himself, Madana Mohana, the one who bewilders Cupid himself, Lord Shri Krishna. So this was one point that initially just flipped the switch for me and made me see how Bhakti Yoga is all about going in depth to our human experiences. As humans, what do we want? We want attachment. We want love. We want joy. We want beauty. And then we have all these yogic processes that just tell you, no, you can't do that. Right? You got to end these attachments, end these suffering. All these things, they're not good for you. But Bhakti Yoga takes it and it flips the script. And that is really what attracted me towards this practice in this first place. And I think we can see a reflection of that within this verse here as well. And another point we can get from this verse is that why is Maharaj Prithu going through all these extensive practices and austerities? Well, as Prabhupada mentions here, he's combining the mind with the material ego to cleanse the mind and gradually progress towards liberation. So we can see during that time, all this hard work was done for the simple goal of cleansing the mind. Conquering the mind itself is such a great challenge. And we have so many pramans talking about this. Of course, Krishna says in the Gita, he says, Bandhur atmat manastasya yen atmani vatmana ajita anatmanastu shatrutve varatet atmaiva shatruvat. For those who have conquered the mind is the best of friends. But who has not conquered the mind, it acts like one's enemy. And Prabhupada points out in the purport that this was particularly important for people practicing Ashtanga Yoga, subduing the mind. Because their end goal is not the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but Paramatma. And to connect with the Paramatma, they would need to stop the agitations of the mind. Because when the mind stops, then they would be able to hear what the Paramatma is speaking from their heart. So that was the whole process back then. And our Acharyas, they make a very illuminating story about this in our Gaudiya tradition. So the story about two devotees, they were once walking side by side. And when they were walking, a vulture flew over their head. And a devotee noticed this vulture, and he cried, Hari Bol! And hearing this, his other friend, his comrade, became confused. He's like, why are you so happy seeing a vulture? That's a symbol of death. You know what happens when they say in olden days in India, when they say when vultures are flying around, that's a bad omen. Some disaster is going to happen. So the second friend, the other devotee, the second friend, he gets confused. And to this, the first devotee looks at him and responds, well, when I see the vulture, my mind goes to the cremation grounds, where cows who die naturally are skinned, and the skin is then tanned, and the hide is used to make the mridanga used in Hari Kirtana. And like this, he's even able to connect such a grave situation to glorification of Krishna. So we can see how a devotee's mind is always naturally trained and actively helping him in his spiritual progress. However, what does an impersonalist or a Mayavadi have? What do they have to actively anchor themselves? How can they look at that vulture and progress towards spirituality? They can't. The environment is not favorable towards them, but for a devotee, the environment is always favorable. That is the mercy. That is the mercy of this movement. That is the mercy and the power of bhakti. So, all these complex philosophies, processes, and practices, they're just ultimately just directed towards one small thing, taming the mind. And yet, for a follower of Mahaprabhu, that goal which is so sought after, pretty much most of the traditions in the world seek after that, is just merely a side effect. And this is evident from Shishtashtakam. Shishtashtakam, of course, is about the glories of the Nama Sankirtana, the 7 glories of Nama Sankirtana. Each verse corresponds to one progressive step that leads towards Krishna Prema. And this cleansing of the mind, which has been placed so much importance here, in this yuga, well, guess what? It's merely only in the very first line of the very first stanza. It's merely but a fraction of the 7 glories that Sankirtan provides. This brings me to another point that I distinctly remember, that the one that helped me flip my switch in my brain and see why bhakti is different from all other traditions and why bhakti is the supreme path. So, Darshan Prabhu was the one that told me this. He said, imagine a scale, and then 0 is the center of that scale. Our material life where we are currently living is in that negative zone. We're always there, we're suffering, worrying, struggling. We always have one anxiety or the other to deal with. People without money, they're always in anxiety about how to make more money. And people with a lot of money, they're always in anxiety about how to maintain their money. So no matter where you go, there's always filled with anxieties. And sometimes we may move from side to side. Sometimes things might be bad and we'll be on -5. Or sometimes, you might just get that internship from Deloitte and then things would go up to a -3. And then you start your work day again and then things go back to -5. So we see that the so-called happiness, the so-called temporary happiness is mentioned in the Gita. It oscillates back and forth, but it always stays in the negatives. And most spiritual traditions in the world, they focus on one question. Well, how do we get out of the negatives? How do we reach zero? How can we stop all this suffering? And that's a desirable and very deep question, of course. But very few traditions ask a more important, a more deeper question. And that is there something beyond zero? Is there a positive side, perhaps? And then comes along Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Mahamadanyaya, the most munificent of incarnation. He not only comes to lift us out of the negatives to zero, but he proclaims, yes, there's a positive side. And the positive side doesn't just stop at +1 or +2. He takes it all the way up to 108 to perfection, to Krishna Prema, the most hidden of the hidden treasures. Of course, we hear our acharyas talk about Krishna Prema and how secretive it is. It's said that the Krishna Prema was hidden within a box, within a box, within a box, within a box, inside of Radharani's heart. And when Mahaprabhu descended, he unlocked all these boxes. And Krishna, the supreme thief, he stole this most hidden treasure and he's giving it out. He's giving it out to each and every person like it's nothing. So that's why our acharyas, they say that the zenith of magnanimous dispensation reaches its peak with the advent of the holy name. That is the unique gift of bhakti, and that is the special mercy of Mahaprabhu. So that is how glorious bhakti is. This yuga is. Not only do we get the easiest, we get the highest, and we get the most confidential. This knowledge is so high. It's called Raja Vidya, chapter 9 of the Gita. And also along with it, Krishna says it's not only Raja Vidya, it's Raja Guhyam. It's the king of all secrets. The knowledge is so confidential, so close to Krishna's heart. Yet it's so readily available to all of us. And Krishna gave us this theoretical knowledge within the Dwapar Yuga. He came, he gave us the Gita, and then the Gita continued with the Srimad Bhagavatam. He told us, he gave his instruction, Manmana Bhava Bhakta, always think of me. Then he said, Sadadam Kirtayantomam, always do my kirtans, and Sarvadharman Parityaja, always surrender unto me. He gave us these instructions, and then he left to his own abode. But of course, we know that this is not the Vedic process. As I mentioned earlier, the process of the Vedas is that not only do they give the theoretical knowledge, but God always sends with him acharyas, real practitioners, that these Mahatmas that lead us the way and that show us how it's done. However, this is where we got extremely lucky. In this Satyuga, we see, for example, we have a Shakti Avesh avatar, an empowered incarnation of Krishna, Maharaj Prithu, come to be this exemplary. But this is the Dhanya Kali Yuga. Here, it's not an empowered incarnation of Krishna that comes, or is it an avatar of Narayan? Rather, it's Krishna himself in his original potency, the supreme potency, the supreme personality of Godhead himself. he personally appears to give us this most glorious, the most secret knowledge. And therefore our acharyas say that we have a special concession. Not only does Gaura Krishna distribute the Yuga Dharma, which is Sankirtan, he distributes the highest quality, which is prema. And in doing that, he invites everyone into the innermost chambers of his heart. And we understand that not all forms of incarnation does that, so we're extremely lucky. And that's the point Prabhupada is trying to make here in this verse. So our acharyas describe this very beautifully indeed. They say that Krishna Chaitanya, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, he has come, he has woven a wreath out of both prema and sankirtana, and he seeks to garland our world with it. Not only does God come to distribute it, but God personally, he goes door to door and he begs people to say it. Please take it. This is the highest. Please take it. This is the highest. This is almost inconceivable. How do you even make sense of this? This is crazier than winning the lottery 1,000,000 times in a row. You can't even put a mathematical figure to this. How do you even start to make sense of this? Yet that is why it's called causeless mercy. So Prabhupada continues and he demonstrates the value of this prema sankirtan, and he contrasts it with the so-called Vedic knowledge, and he shows us how much more valuable the sankirtan is. And we see practical examples of this with Mahaprabhu's pastimes as well. One of the most popular pastimes, of course, is his interaction with the Mayavadi sannyasi, Prakashananda Saraswati. It's in the Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita. So Prakashananda, this great Mayavadi, he goes and he inquires from the Lord as the reason why he's preferring the Sankirtan movement. Prakashananda Saraswati, of course, understands that Nimai Pandit, he's the most learned scholar. His name and fame has spread all throughout India at this point, and then he looks out and he sees Mahaprabhu dancing with madmen. And therefore he asks, well, why do you abandon your meditation and study of Vedanta, which is the sole duty of a sannyasi, to be here dancing with these fanatics? And Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself, Krishna that says, Vedyam Pavitram Omkara, which means he is all that is to be known. He is knowledge himself. He folds his hands and he submissively says, well, I'm a great fool. And my spiritual master, he forbade me to play with Vedanta philosophy. Instead, he just said, chant the holy names of Krishna. This is the essence of all the mantras or Vedic hymns. So we can see the mercy of the Lord here. He represents himself like the numberless fools in this age who are absolutely incapable of studying Vedanta philosophy, just like me. I tried to understand this verse for 30 minutes and I had to give up. So we can see the mercy of the Lord where he does this. He pretends, or he does his leela for us fools. And therefore, speaking for our benefits, he recites the one famous and most important shloka from our sampradaya. Harer nama eva kevalam kalo nasteva gatir anyatha. This age of Kali, there is no other means for self-realization than chanting the holy name. And the analogy Prabhupada often gives for this is Prabhupada compares bhakti, which is just like a fire. You could be a scientist with a PhD in thermodynamics. You can understand each and every mechanics of how fire works. Or you could be a 5-year-old naughty boy, completely ignorant and blissful. And when both of you touch the fire, it has the same effect. Doesn't matter how learned you are. So, I guess the point we can make here is that knowledge is useless if even God himself, even God considers himself a fool in pursuit of bhakti. That's how great this knowledge is. In fact, it takes me back to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. He waged war against all the isms. In fact, both the Hindus and the Muslims, they hated him, they were after him. Why? Because of compassion. The fact that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu incarnated in this world and people were still so attached to their regular identities and their identities of their so-called religion, their fake religion, disturbed a Vaishnava like him so much that he couldn't sit there. Now we of course understand that the Hare Krishnas, we are peaceful. But out of compassion, we can see that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he wanted to completely destroy all other factions and establish our Sampradaya as the supreme. Not out of pride, but wanting to give this love to each and every single person. That is what the heart of a Vaishnava is. A Vaishnava is already liberated. He's already in the perfected stage. Yet what is he thinking about? He's thinking about how he can save others constantly. That is only in a Vaishnava. You wouldn't find that anywhere else in the so-called sannyasis or these other yogis that attain perfection or liberation. We see so many examples of this. Of course, the one contemporary example is Srila Acharyapad Jayapataka Swami Maharaj. I remember seeing him for the very first time. That was the first day I was in Mayapur. And Toshri Prabhu was just telling me, well, you're probably about to meet the most important person in ISKCON today. And I had no idea who he was. And then we go up to the Lotus building and I see him give class. It's an old man, completely paralyzed, unable to speak, in a wheelchair. He's there, left half of his face, completely paralyzed. And my first reaction was, this man is in pain. He was giving a lecture, and while he was giving class, the devotees were coming up to him and they were pouring eye drops on him, wiping his saliva off his face. Yet he didn't stop giving katha. That is the compassion of a Vaishnava. Already perfected, yet always thinking about how to save others. Always giving others opportunity. I remember another disciple of Jayapataka Swami Maharaj said that once he was traveling on a train and the train was completely packed. There weren't any seats to sit down. And Jayapataka Swami Maharaj, he was a sannyasi, he was wearing the sannyas robes, and the culture in India is that they have some level of respect for the sannyasis. So one person, seeing that he was in a sannyas robe, he moved his leg halfway to offer half his seat to Maharaj. And just as Maharaj was about to take that seat, another seat opened up, a person left, and there was another seat available. But what did Maharaj do? He still chose to share half his seat, even at his own discomfort. Why? He chose his own discomfort just to give the other person an opportunity for service. This is the glory of a Vaishnava. Of course, we see this case in point with Srila Prabhupada. Old age, attained perfection, living happily in Vrindavan. Yet what does he do? He goes into the hell that is America by himself. Why? To follow the words of his Guru Maharaj. That is the power of bhakti. The devotees, they don't care for their own sense satisfaction. The only thing they care about is how can I please Krishna. And they understand the only way to please Krishna is through the Vani of their Guru. And we see an example like Prithu Maharaj here. Yet we have so many examples around us of these acharyas, people setting these examples. So before I was getting deeper into bhakti, I had a deep concern. I was concerned. I wanted to do more research on Srila Prabhupada. I wanted to see, well, is this man legit? Does he actually follow what he was saying? Because you look at all these holy men and you find a trail list of controversies from them, from like sexual abuse cases to financial scandals. So I was very concerned to see if Prabhupada would fit in this category, and thankfully, fortunately, what really led me into becoming a devotee and understanding and appreciating this philosophy deeper was Prabhupada. He preaches what he says. That is what a Vaishnava is. That Mahatman. He leads by example. Always wanting to serve his Guru Maharaj. I remember watching a video where one devotee, he was doing kirtan, and at the end of the kirtan he says Jai Prabhupada, and he noticed Prabhupada himself also saying Jai Prabhupada, and the devotee came to the realization that whenever all these devotees they glorify Prabhupada is thinking about his Prabhupada, his Guru Maharaj. That amount of faith, that amount of shraddha in his Guru and the Vani of his Guru. So many examples. We are so fortunate and blessed. So we're able to establish the point of how easy the path of bhakti is, but I did want to make one last point before I do wrap up. Is yes, we hear from all this that bhakti is the easiest path. But actually, in a way, bhakti is also harder than all the other paths. Why? Because in bhakti, you got to give up your heart completely. There's no holding back. What does Bhagavan say? Chapter 9, he says, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhaktya prayachadi tadaham bhaktyupahartam ashnami prayatatmanaha. You can offer anything, from flowers to regular water. Water is available everywhere. But the key ingredients he emphasizes twice: bhakti, love, your heart. So simple, but so difficult at the same time. Yes, ostensibly speaking, what Maharaj Prithu is doing here, the practice of Ashtanga Yoga, to be a big jnani, to follow the process of liberation, it is much harder. But really it's much harder to give your heart completely. Because in other forms of yoga, you can still hold back your heart to some extent. But in bhakti, you cannot. Krishna demands it all. Therefore, we're given this process, step-by-step process, where we can completely surrender our heart. And what is the result of giving ourselves completely? That sarva dharman parityajya, we get supreme reality himself, the full face of Godhead. Not only do we get him, we can bind him, just like Mother Yashoda does. That is the power of bhakti. They say, acharyas say, Krishna will eat flowers. Krishna will even eat a flower if you present it with bhakti. Reminds me of a pastime in Hastinapur. Krishna came before the war, And Duryodhan, he wanted Krishna on his side. Therefore, to impress Krishna, Duryodhan organized this massive feast. When Krishna was coming into the city, he had all the massive elephants, these trumpets were playing, bugles, all sorts of opulent decorations. But where did Krishna go? Krishna is not there. Krishna is not at the feast. Well, the word's out, Krishna is at the house of Vidura. And Vidura was not home at that moment, but his wife was. Krishna goes up to the wife and Krishna says, I'm hungry, feed me. The wife's like, oh, I don't have anything. Because the wife is thinking, such a great king, he's presented himself here. I have nothing worthy to offer him. It's such a great feast is being prepared for him. And Krishna is like, what about those bananas? So the wife, she goes, grabs these bananas, and while peeling the bananas, out of her complete ecstasy, she's throwing the bananas into the bin and giving peels to Krishna. And Duryodhan is like, where is Krishna? I've organized such a massive feast for him, but he's not in my house, and the news gets out that Krishna is in Vidura's home. So Narada Muni, he goes to Vidura, he says, let's go there, and what does he see? He sees Krishna eating banana peels. That is the power of bhakti. That is the power of love. So we understand what is actually necessary to surrender our heart. It's not theoretical knowledge. Theoretical knowledge is useless unless it gives us the impetus to act in such a way that we change our lives. The idea here is that we should use our head, what's in our head, to soften our heart, so that we can convince ourselves to chant the Maha Mantra more, to surrender to the sadhu more, to understand this process given by Sri Krishna Mahaprabhu, and all this intelligence, all this process, they would come naturally. And at one point, when we get to Nishta, it's not so relevant anymore. So, I would like to conclude on this point as well. Just as Prabhupada says here, just like material world has a beginning in this material sound, our spiritual life has a beginning in the spiritual sound vibration. Not only is our beginning in this sound vibration, it's the means, it's the end, it's the goal itself. Okay, so it's almost 9. Do I stop here? Okay. Hare Krishna. Jai Ananta Kodi Vaishnav Vrinda ki Jai.